wonderful day. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you all for coming. And when I leave, I will leave Dee with a flash drive with this presentation, so you're welcome to post it on the board website, and I certainly will post it on car.org tomorrow. So my slides are your slides. If you want to use them in newsletters, and can I put this here? Okay, good. I don't want to. Yeah. You know, you can put your picture in the corner. This is your collateral, so hopefully there's something in it that will be useful to you. I'm not going to do really any big marketing announcements, just to let you know that if you are using your iPad and you've been thinking about getting an iPad, now that there's an iPad 3 HD, you're interested, you can actually have your clients sign contracts with a stylus or with their finger using the iPad on the Zip Form Mobile Edition, so that's pretty cool. The way I'm going to kind of go forward with this presentation is spend about half of it on the economy and the market, and then the other half I'm going to go through the highlights of our buyer and seller surveys, so I can give you some really concrete suggestions on how to go about adapting your business to what consumers are looking for. So hopefully there'll be a few grains of insight in all that. So let me just start with kind of the broad picture. This is a look at GDP. And you notice a couple of things. One, you can see the dramatic contraction that we had in 2009. And a 2.8% growth rate in 2010. And that reflected all of the money that was thrown at the economy, be it the Bush tax cuts, infrastructure, TARP, capital given to lenders. I mean, there was just a lot of effort by the government to make sure that the banks didn't go under. Financial system kind of weathered the storm, if you will. A bit of a pullback in 2011. We had about 1% less, growth went from 2.8 to 1.7% in 2011. And the way I visualize that in my mind is like a relay race, where the baton was passed from the federal government to the private sector. And you kind of have the state and local governments providing what's the opposite of momentum, a lot of inertia to keep things held back a little bit. And the private sector is like, well, we want to make sure that demand is really going to be there before we hire full-time workers. So actually the temp agencies have done well as we came out of the downturn, although now we are seeing some better employment numbers. And in fact, in the fourth quarter, we had a 3% rate of growth for the first time in over 2 years. So that is, I think if I were going to summarize my comments about the market and the economy, it's like we are improving. We've got a long way to go, but we're well up from the bottom. And what I've tried to do here is just give you the annual data for 2011 with respect to a couple of key economic metrics, if you will, and then compared that to the target. So we had last year on average about a 9% unemployment rate. We need to get to 6. GDP grew at about 1.7, 1.8%. We want to be up at 3. Non-farm job growth, about 1% gain. We want to be at 3. I can see the birds agree with me out there. The geese agree with me out there. And CPI was a little bit higher than we'd like, in large part because of some exogenous supply shocks like we're experiencing right now in terms of gas prices. Consumer spending makes up about 70% of GDP. So that's why there's always a lot of focus on retail sales and consumer confidence. And what you get out of this slide is just, wow, we're way up from January of 2009. There's, people are feeling better, but I don't think we're going to get a real strong upward movement in consumer confidence until the jobs picture just looks a lot better. And we're getting there, but as long as people are feeling insecure about their own kind of job situation or their children or whatever it is, I think that kind of keeps a lid on confidence. I think the other issue is just we're in a 24/7 news cycle. There's no way of escaping it, and it's the negative news that gets out there on a regular basis. Every downturn and recovery cycle is unique. What's been unique about this cycle is many things, but I think one of the biggest is just the percentage of homeowners who are underwater. Almost 30% of the mortgages in California, and this is CoreLogic data for the third quarter of 2011, are underwater, right? And another 4.6% are, very close to being underwater. And I think there's two things happening there. One is what I would call a reverse wealth effect. People that are living in homes and maybe they've got 2 more years to go before their ARM adjusts, maybe they're doing fine in terms of being able to financially pay their mortgage, but they're $200,000 underwater and they don't really see that changing anytime soon. They're in a little bit of limbo, right? You can't really make kind of long-term aggressive financial decisions when you've got this kind of hanging over your head. So I think it really does, reverse wealth effect. People maybe feel even poorer than they actually are because they don't know how they're ever gonna cure this. I think the other issue though is, I don't know about you, but when I go on the freeway or go into a mall, I'm always a little bit surprised at how busy things are. And I certainly felt that way over the holiday season. So squatter economy, how many people are in a position where they're in a home, they haven't paid on the mortgage for 6, 8, 10, 12, 2 years? Gives them a lot more disposable income to do other things. Now, I haven't seen this quantified and I don't want to throw a number out, but I do think that some of that is operating as well. I would also suggest that the underground economy is robust and that some people are even bartering, just to kind of move things along. I mentioned the improvement in the jobs picture. Nationally, the unemployment rate in January was 8.3%. That's the lowest in 3 years. California, that for over 2 years had an unemployment rate of over 12%, is at 11.1%. So really moving in the right direction. Now, just to anticipate in the Q&A, one of the questions that I frequently get is, what's the real rate of unemployment? I mean, 8.3, but we all know. So I think what I would say about the number is this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics many decades ago decided that the methodology for measuring unemployment would include the requirement that you need to be actively looking for work in order to be counted as unemployed. So if you are a discouraged worker, you're not counted. So I don't think they're trying to cook the books. It's just that's, and if you're comparing, time trends and looking at changes over time, the reality is the unemployment picture is looking much better. However, if you were to include discouraged workers, and if you were to include people that are underemployed, so let's say you have a teaching credential but you're working retail, it's probably closer to 14 or 15%. Also, if you look at specific demographic cohorts, for example, white males over the age of 55, single female heads of households, or African American youth under the age of 24, those unemployment rates are in excess of 20% or have been. So it's again, aggregate data is always a wonderful opportunity to tell stories about what the individual entries are. Now, one of the things that was nice to see in the latest California data is the fact that construction and financial activities, which both sectors lost a significant number of jobs between the peak in 2005 and the middle of last year, both showed net gains in the last 2 months. So that's great. The other thing, and it's not highlighted in yellow, but the government sector between 2005 and the middle of last year lost 40,000 jobs. This is going to get bigger. It's going to get significantly bigger, and it's going to be a continued drag on economic growth. And I don't know what the answer is. If you saw the news last night, or at least down in Los Angeles, the CBS Evening News had a story about pension reform, the ballot measure for pension reform in San Jose. And San Jose, if you've read the book Boomerang yet, and if you haven't, I want to highly recommend it. You all know who Michael Lewis is. He wrote The Blind Side, Liar's Poker, The Big Short. Well, Boomerang was kind of an ancillary book to The Big Short, where he looks at what's going on in Europe, and he goes through, you know, Iceland and Greece and Germany. And the last kind of entity that he looks at is San Jose. You know, and he talks about the pension system and the fact that if you're a firefighter making $100,000 a year at age 40, you retire with a $90,000 pension for life. And that's not good or bad. You know, these contracts were negotiated during good times. But now they had a pie chart that showed that 55% of the revenue that San Jose takes in goes to the pensions of past employees. And San Jose is not alone. This is repeated in community after community. And it's really a no-win situation. You know, they don't have the money to pay on these obviously rich contracts, but on the other hand, you had people that dedicated their lives to the city and so on and so forth. So the only thing I know for sure is that we are going to continue to see a shrinkage in the number of people that are employed at the municipal, county, regional, and state level, because there just simply is not the money there to take them on. And at least going forward for new hires, the kind of promises in terms of benefits later on, I think, will be much reduced. So anyway, we're watching that with interest, obviously. This is a look at housing permits in California going back to the prior boom of the late 1980s, and you can just see how dramatically that world changed between the peak in 2004 and 2005, when we had over 200,000 units permitted in the state, down to 2009, where it was less than 40,000. So in 2011, we had about a 5% increase in permits. So again, we've reached a turning point, if you will. Note also that in 2011, you had an expansion in the share of multifamily permits being issued, and that really reflects the fact that the rental market is quite strong, that vacancy rates are down, that rents are firm and in many areas climbing as people that kind of lost their homes are going into the rental market. It also is very attractive for investors. So a lot of positive news in the rental market. Just a couple of words about monetary and fiscal policy. The Fed announced about 3 weeks ago now that they would be keeping rates low. In other words, the Fed funds target that since the beginning of 2009 has been between 0 and 0.25%, effectively 0, would remain so through the end of 2014. Now, why would they do that? Well, they're trying to do one thing that they can do, and that is reduce uncertainty. Like every time the Fed meets, everybody goes nuts, right? The columnists and the blogosphere, and what are they going to do? You know, they're just saying, look, guys, we are going to have a very proactive, loose monetary policy through the end of 2014. So it gives people less to worry about. Obviously, there's less urgency. For those of you that have been around as long as I have, we know that low rates are great, but slightly rising rates are even better for the market, in the sense that it gives people a reason to kind of lock in and get that transaction done. So the Fed is doing all it can. Rates are at record lows. The rate environment is not really the issue with the housing market right now. It really is short sales, and it's getting people funded for those loans. There are a lot of issues that are going to impact our industry for years to come that are on the table in Washington. Now, nothing's really on the table in an election year, but once the election is decided, there will be a number of really big issues. And one is tax reform. We are likely to at least see an effort at major tax reform. I had the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. last week with the leadership team of CAR, and we went around to the California congressional delegation. And one of the things that we've had going for the last couple of years is a resolution that NAR has, distributed widely, that we've asked people to sign, saying, please keep the mortgage interest deduction exactly as it is. Don't touch it. It's great. And a lot of people have signed